Welcome back to Beyond the Bolter. You've sent us one of the most interesting and fast-changing sets of competitive analysis we've seen all year. Before we jump into it though, if you're enjoying the content and want to see more, make sure to hit subscribe, like the video, and let us know what you think about today's topic. We know you've probably got a lot to say, and we'd love to see it in the comments. Depending on how the conversation goes, we might even turn it into a topic for a future episode.
It was quite the month.
It really was. It details the Winter 2025 Grotmas Calendar Balance Update for Warhammer 40,000 10th edition. And I have to say, if you were playing competitively in the fall, you might as well just, prepare to throw that playbook right out the window.
Our sources indicate this wasn't just a seasonal rules refresh. It was a comprehensive competitive reset, all delivered under the guise of, holiday cheer. Okay, let's unpack this. This wasn't just a holiday gift box. It was a total competitive reset.
That phrase, competitive reset, is entirely accurate. I mean, the magnitude of the changes, and particularly their delivery method, it just fundamentally altered the entire strategic terrain.
The delivery method is key here, isn't it?
It is. Traditionally, Games Workshop used the festive period for the Advent engine, which was mostly just aesthetic teasers, a miniature reveal, a cool piece of art, that kind of thing, designed to generate hype.
Right, something to look forward to.
Exactly. The Grotmas Calendar, however, just inverted this model entirely. It delivered substantive, game-changing mechanical rules every single day from December 1st right up to the 24th.
24 straight days of new rules? That's an unexpected influx of mechanics compressed into a single 3-week window. The community's term for it, a soft edition reset, feels pretty spot on.
It is, and we saw an immediate ripple effect across every major event, didn't we?
We absolutely did. Tournaments like the Rise of the Empire GT and the Dragon's Cup immediately revealed that the established index archetypes, the reliable winners from the summer and fall, had become almost obsolete just overnight.
So players who had mastered the old meta were suddenly just scrambling to get their heads around these new mechanical ceilings.
Completely. And that's why we need to define that core philosophical shift for you right now, because it really governs everything we're going to discuss today. We're moving away from one type of competitive success and firmly into another.
The definition is crucial, yeah.
The old paradigm, let's call it, relied on winning via raw datasheet efficiency. This meant a unit won primarily because its stats and its point cost just provided better value than its opponents. It was often irrespective of other moving parts.
Just raw math. My unit is better than your unit, point for point.
Exactly. Now, the victory condition is winning via complex conditional synergy. The game shifted from is my unit good to is my unit optimally buffed by 3 or 4 interconnected rules that are only active when a very specific condition is met.
So the era of just spamming the best single unit, that's over. Now victory is about manipulating triggers. Things like, standing on an objective, forcing a battle shock test?
Or perfectly stacking 3 orders onto a single squad. Yes, you are no longer just buying good tanks, you're buying good tanks that become great only when they're ordered, and become absolutely devastating when the enemy is on an objective marker.
Okay, so our mission today is to analyze the primary disruptors that exploited this new philosophy, and I'm guessing we're starting with the Astra Militarum's Grizzled Company.
We have to, but we'll also be diving into the 2 contrasting Space Marine detachments and the surprising rise of the Necrons' Shatter arsenal.
Let's start with that calendar context again, because the speed of the delivery is what made this so disruptive. Why did that delivery method, daily rules reveals, magnify the impact so much?
Well, it was a massive psychological factor. Just imagine for a second, you're prepping for a major tournament, right? And every 24 hours, a key faction's rules are fundamentally rewritten.
It's chaos. You can't plan.
It's total chaos. And these detachments weren't just small, iterative buffs. They were designed specifically to revitalize factions that had been languishing or, felt they lacked a clear identity. By compressing the release, Games Workshop essentially forced the competitive community to learn and adapt to the highest energy ceilings within this really chaotic time frame and maximize the sense of discovery.
And central to that discovery were those 3 key conditionals that now seem to define success. Let's break those down clearly for everyone listening, because they're really the measuring sticks for the entire new meta.
Certainly. These are the 3 primary activation points that the Grotmas rules centered on. It's all about transforming liabilities into assets.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is order saturation. This is best exemplified by the Astra Militarum. It's the ability to efficiently and widely buff multiple units simultaneously. It turns a unit from its baseline strength into a massive force multiplier.
Covering way more of the board with buffs than was ever possible before.
Exactly. The second is objective proximity. In 10th edition, winning means scoring primary points, and that means you have to move units onto objectives. It's that simple.
Sure.
This conditional mechanic now mandates that you are either massively rewarded or critically punished based on whether you are standing on those scoring zones.
It turns primary mission play into a constant high-stakes tactical decision, so you're punished for playing the mission.
Or rewarded. It's a nice edge. And a third, which I find the most strategically subversive, is battle shock manipulation.
Right. Battle shock is inherently a penalty. You lose your objective control, your OC, and you can't use strategies. It's a bad state to be in.
It's supposed to be, but several of these new detachments just flip that script entirely, turning battle shock into a positive resource. You willingly accept the liability of losing OC to unlock this overwhelming disproportionate lethality.
Okay, so if we're looking for the absolute peak of leveraging all 3 of those for just oppressive firepower, we have to begin with the Imperial Hammer. Let's talk about the Astra Militarum's Grizzled Company.
The Guard arguably received the most dramatic, successful glow-up of the entire calendar. The Grizzled Company detachment didn't just add new layers, it surgically addressed the 2 foundational weaknesses that had plagued the Guard since the edition launched.
Which were?
Yeah, the friction-heavy order economy and the inherent unreliability of their baseline ballistic skill, that classic BS 4+.
This is a perfect example of a rule-fixing faction friction then, because Guard players were always frustrated by having to choose. You either maximize your firepower in one spot, or you maintain mobility, but you couldn't really do both. The Grizzled Company seems to have just erased that dilemma.
It has, and it's done through the core detachment rule, Ruthless Discipline. So let's break this rule down into its 2 parts, starting with the economy fix.
Okay, the economy fix. It says every officer model in the Army gains +1 order. Now, that seems minor on paper, but when we look at list building, why is that +1 order such a transformative force multiplier?
Because it completely eliminates the support tax. That's the key.
The support tax?
Yeah, before this, if you wanted your entire battle line, say 3 tanks, 2 key infantry squads, and a unit of sentinels, to receive orders, you had to budget points from multiple officers. You'd take extra Castellans or another command squad, whose sole job was just to facilitate the order economy. They were necessary overhead.
Right, you were spending points on units that didn't do much themselves, they just enabled other units.
Exactly, a support tax. Now, a single Lord Solar Leontis or a tank commander can cover substantially more of the battlefield with orders. And this newfound efficiency allows a competitive player to shave off anywhere from 100 to 150 points from those redundant support units.
And those points go right back into more guns.
They go right back into lethal assets, more Kasserkin, more special weapons, or crucially, more tanks that become viable thanks to the second part of the role.
Which brings us to that critical reliability buff, the core of Ruthless Discipline. Any ordered unit gets to reroll 1s to hit against all targets, but the synergistic element, the real kicker, is if the target is within range of an objective marker, this escalates to reroll 1s to wound as well.
And this is where the mathematical volatility of the Guard list just vanishes. I mean, let's consider a Lemon Rust Demolisher, a powerful tank, but historically very swingy.
A casino cannon.
A total casino cannon. It's hitting on 4+ baseline, so you're relying on a natural 4, 5, or 6 on the dice to connect. That's a 50% chance of failure on any given shot.
The Demolisher is all about a low number of high-damage shots.
Yeah.
Missing those critical few shots can just lose you the game on a key turn.
It can, but by granting ones to hit, you smooth out that low end of the dice rolls. You make those precious low-shot weapons far more consistent. But when you get the full reroll suite of reroll ones to hit and reroll ones to wound when you're targeting an objective, the output spike is just exponential.
It's not a small buff.
It's not a small buff. It transforms statistically prone units into threats you can actually rely on. The opponent can no longer just hope your bad dice rolls will save them. The highest probability of executing 3 successful hits and 2 successful wounds is achieved precisely when that full reroll suite is active.
So this establishes that king of the hill dynamic we mentioned. To score primary points, the enemy has to commit assets to the scoring zone. The Grizzled Company then mathematically guarantees that standing on that objective makes you the subject of the Guard's most optimized, reliable, and punishing fire lanes.
The opponent is forced into this agonizing choice between scoring the mission or protecting their most expensive units. It's a brutal dilemma.
And I'm sure that choice is made even worse by the detachment's strategies and enhancements.
Oh, absolutely. They unlock interactions that were previously considered just illegal or impossible under the index rules.
Let's start with the defensive piece that turns their anvil into a hammer, the meta-defining enhancement of human detail. This is arguably a brilliant piece of synergy design. Abhuman detail allows a commissar to issue orders to, and this is the key bit, attached to Ogryn and Bolgryn units. Okay, and Bolgryn are already incredibly tough, T6, right?
Yeah, they are T6. They have a 4+ invulnerable save, and they have -1 damage from their shields. That triple stack of durability makes them one of the toughest infantry units in the game. But historically, they just lacked offensive output. They were purely an anvil.
So you bring this big, tough unit of Bolgryn, you park it in the center, and you expect it to hold the line but not really kill anything important.
Precisely. They were a speed bump, a very durable speed bump, but a speed bump nonetheless. But with human detail, a commissar can now attach and critically issue the fixed bayonets order.
And fixed bayonets gives them +1 to hit in melee. It means they're hitting on 2s in melee?
So combine that with the detachment rolls R1s to hit, and you now have a midboard anchor that is almost impossible to efficiently remove, yet is capable of deleting enemy units in return. It's a perfect fusion of defense and offense.
This elevates the Bolgryn from a speed bump to a black hole in the center of the board. Wow, okay, what about the aggressive tools? We have to talk about the 1 CP lethal stratagem, Morty Minute. This is the alpha strike potential.
Mortian Minute is frightening because of its cost-to-effect ratio. For just 1 CP, it grants a blanket +1 strength to all ranged weapons in a unit affected by the first-rank fire, second-rank fire order.
The classic FRFSRF.
Yep, and while thematically you think of it for the standard las gun, the rule applies to every special weapon the unit is carrying.
And since the best Guard players are running specialized units like Kasserkin, that means those special weapons are the real targets. Let's walk everyone through the exponential scaling on a 10-model Kasserkin squad, the premier special weapons carrier when they're under FRFSRF and Morty Minute.
Okay, so we're talking about massive shifts in wounding breakpoints. Let's consider the 3 main weapon types they carry.
Let's do it.
First, the plasma guns. They're baseline strength 8 when you overcharge them. Under Morty and Minute, they become strength 9. This means they are now wounding standard T4 Space Marines on a 2+ psi.
Even T5 Terminators on a 2+ psi.
Wow. It's an incredible leap in efficiency. You're effectively guaranteeing a wound, assuming you hit.
And what about the heavy anti-tank?
The Meltaguns.
The Meltaguns.
The Meltaguns, usually strength 9, become strength 10, and strength 10 is that magic number for threatening high-toughness targets, main battle tanks, knights. The increase to S10 significantly raises the wound probability against T10, T11, and T12 targets, which used to be able to shrug off S9 attacks more reliably.
So even your infantry are a credible threat to super heavies.
Absolutely. And finally, the high-volume weapons, the hot-shot volley guns. They move from strength 4 to strength 5. This ensures they are wounding standard T4 infantry on 3s rather than 4s, which dramatically increases their efficacy against other factions' battle line units.
The result is staggering. You have a 100-point infantry unit for a single command point, achieving an output profile that can favorably trade into enemy units that cost 2 or even 3 times its value. It makes the opponent's investment look mathematically foolish.
And we shouldn't overlook the little utility tools that support this robust playstyle. There are enhancements that extend order range, allowing your tank commanders to operate more independently.
You don't have to keep them in a vulnerable aura castle anymore. And tools like Spec Ops Veteran grant stealth to critical units like the Kazkin, providing essential mid-board survivability until they're ready to deliver that Mordian minute payload. Okay, we have the theory, but let's anchor it in competitive reality. David Smith's 6-0 victory at the Rise of the Empire GT proved this archetype. The Grizzled Company is the current gold standard.
Smith's list was a masterclass in exploiting this new synergy. And crucially, it was not a one-trick pony. It wasn't just pure artillery spam from the backfield. It was a highly refined hybrid list that blended elite infantry and heavy armor, maximizing every single point of order efficiency.
Walk us through the synergy choices in that list. He ran Lord Solantis, obviously, for the CP generation and the crucial ability to order any unit. And he had the Commissar with a human detach attached to that 6-model Bulgren squad. That's the mid-board anchor we talked about, right?
But the true genius for me was his reliance on units that were notoriously unreliable in the Index era, the Lehman Russ Vanquishers.
The Vanquisher cannon. That's another textbook example of a casino weapon. High potential damage, but only one shot. The variance is just crippling. And he ran 3 of them.
He ran 3 of them.
Why commit almost 500 points to a unit that's so swingy?
Because the Grizzled Company entirely removes the volatility. Under a BS 3+ order, combined with the detachment's full roll suite against a target on an objective, those vanquishes transform. They go from a gamble into reliable anti-tank snipers. If you absolutely need to hit and wound a knight to prevent it from swimming the primary score, you can now count on those vanquishers to deliver.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The key to the Grizzled Company's success, proven by that 6-0 result, it's not its brute force. It's the systematic removal of variance. You can count on your Bulgren to survive, and you can count on your vanquishers to hit their target. That certainty is just devastating to opponents who are relying on the Guard failing a key role.
It forces the opponent to deal with guaranteed output, which is the very definition of a stat-check army. And this sets us up perfectly for our next section, the Great Astartes Divide. We move from the overwhelming Imperial offensive to 2 very, very different approaches to Space Marine success: defensive attrition and offensive risk.
Okay, so if the Guard is all about maximizing offense, the Dark Angel's Wrath of the Rock detachment is about maximizing defense. This feels like a return to their inner circle fantasy, prioritizing endurance, attrition, and the ability to just hold ground in a way that feels almost unbreakable.
The core of this detachment, Dutiful Tenacity, is a defensive masterpiece, and it's because it targets the wounding step of the attack sequence rather than the saving throw or the damage, right? The rule is deceptively simple. If the strength of the attack is greater than the toughness of the unit, subtract 1 from the wound roll.
So let's walk through that. If I'm a T5 Terminator and I get hit by an S8 weapon, the strength is higher than my toughness, so I get a -1 modifier on the roll to wound. Let's really dig into the mathematical consequence of this, because that's where the depth of this defense lies.
This creates a critical breakpoint shift in the wound table against almost every single optimal anti-marine weapon in the game. It's huge.
Okay, give us an example.
So, consider the common anti-marine profiles. An S8 weapon, like an overcharged plasma gun or a power fist targeting a T5 Terminator, would normally wound on a 3+ side. Because S8 is greater than T5, Dutiful Tenacity applies and it pushes the required roll to a 4+ side.
That one step from a 3+ psi to a 4+ psi is mathematically a 33% reduction in the wounding efficiency of that attacker. I mean, that's the cost for an opponent to just use the right weapon against them.
A third of their damage just gone. Now look at a different benchmark. An S5 heavy bolter against a standard T4 Marine. S5 is greater than T4, so it should wound on a 3+ psi.
Again, dutiful tenacity pushes it to a 4+ psi, so even weapons that are only slightly stronger than the target's toughness are penalized. It broadens the protection across the opponent's entire armory.
And conversely,
Conversely, if an S4 weapon hits a T5 Terminator, the strength is not greater than the toughness, so the rule doesn't apply. The S4 weapon still wounds on a 5+ psi. The rule specifically, surgically targets the high-strength weapons that are designed to kill elite infantry efficiently.
This stacks exponentially, creating what you called exponential durability on units like Deathwing Knights, who already have 4 wounds and a built-in -1 damage. This defense becomes oppressive.
It does. An opponent is now wounding on 4s instead of 3s, and they need 3 failed saves just to kill a single model because of the damage reduction.
It forces the opponent to commit wildly disproportionate resources. You're talking about focusing the full firepower of a high-value tank for an entire turn, just to remove a small squad of Deathwing Knights. It's the ultimate attrition fortress philosophy.
And the stratagem just reinforced this concept of the immovable object. Lion's Will is the key scoring tool. For 1 CP, it grants +1 to objective control, the OC, and +1 to hit.
right, and OC is so important for these elite low model count lists. They usually suffer from poor scoring potential.
They do. But with this stratagem, 5 Deathwing Knights, already T5 -1 to wound, they go from OC5 to OC10. They can suddenly outscore nearly any opposing battle line unit, and they become more accurate in the ensuing combat at the same time.
So they're anchors that cannot be moved and cannot be outscored. And what if the opponent tries to use mobility to get around them?
Then you have Leonine Aggression. It allows the Dark Angels to declare a reactive charge at the end of the opponent's charge phase. It's a powerful heroic intervention that ensures the enemy can't just bypass the Deathwing Knights to target your softer support units.
We saw this in practice with Jonathan Arkin's 5-0 list. It's the definition of a static army. The Lion L. Johnson's aura provides fight first and another layer of -1 to wound, which stacks with the detachment rules.
It creates this unbelievably resilient Death Star bubble that is mathematically agonizing for the opponent to engage. The whole game plan is simple. Sit on objectives, refuse to die, and just let the opponent attrition themselves out against your walls.
Now, we take that concept of the Space Marine and flip it completely on its head. If the Dark Angels are the shield, relying on mathematical certainty, the Blood Angels' rage-cursed Onslaught is the ultimate expression of offensive risk. It's a total embrace of chaos and aggression.
This is the definitive example of battle shock manipulation as a core competitive resource. The detachment codifies the faction's red thirst identity into a tiered melee buff system via a rule called Maddened Ferocity.
And the passive buffs are already good, right?
They're very good. You get to reroll wound rolls of 1 in melee, and you get +1 attack on the charge. That's a solid baseline.
But the Black Rage tier is the strategic hook. If the unit is battle-shocked, the bonus increases dramatically to +2 attacks.
And the stratagem just flips on its head. Battle shock, the liability, becomes the desired state. And the designers gave Blood Angels the tools to deliberately self-inflict this condition, understanding that losing OC is a necessary trade-off for maximum lethality.
So how do they actively choose to take on this negative state? Through stratagems like Red Wrath.
Red Wrath is a classic devil's bargain. It grants a critical offensive spike, +1 strength and +1 AP. However, the player can choose to become battle-shocked to receive both buffs. You take the test, and if you fail, you get the buffs. If you pass, you can choose to fail anyway. You accept OC0 just to activate the power.
And in Sense8, Rampage is crucial for delivery. It lets the unit advance and charge, and if you accept being battle-shocked, you avoid the charge roll penalty. It guarantees they arrive with the optimal activated buff profile.
The strategic trade-off is brutal, which is why we're calling it a Scorched Earth approach. The Blood Angels player accepts OC0. They accept the inability to use defensive stratagems on that unit. But the overwhelming violence, the +2 attacks, +1 strength, and +1 AP, is designed to completely vaporize the enemy unit currently standing on the objective. It removes the control problem by removing the opponent.
This strategy relies entirely on tabling the opponent through superior melee output, rather than trying to sustain points control. And we saw Matt Charles's 5-0 list exemplify this aggression. He was using jump-packed Death Company with power fists and Inferno pistols.
Let's just highlight the offensive profile of that unit when it's battle-shocked under Red Wrath. A 10-model squad of Death Company can output 40 to 50 power fist attacks.
50 power fist attacks?
50. And those attacks are hitting its strength 9 or 10 with AP 3 and damage 2. That profile in that volume can one-shot almost any vehicle, monstrous creature, or knight in the game. It is a terrifying surgical alpha strike weapon.
And the cleanup stratagem is Deathless Duty. This ensures the trade works in their favor.
Yes, it either lets the unit fight on death, or, critically, it applies a sticky on-death mechanic. It ensures the unit remains controlled even after the unit has been removed by enemy fire. They pay the cost of rage, but they hold the line.
It's the highest expression of conditional synergy, turning a failure state into a strategic advantage for aggressive board clear. We've seen the Imperial focus on variance removal and the Astartes focus on durability or extreme aggression. Let's shift now to the Necrons, Drukhari, and Chaos forces, which leveraged unique risk mechanics and mobility.
Starting with the Necrons, the Star Shatter arsenal marks a significant departure from the teleportation tricks of the Hypercrypt Legion meta. This detachment is all about pure mobile firepower, using the assault keyword as its primary engine.
The detachment rule, Relentless Onslaught, again reinforces that punish the primary dynamic with +1 to hit against units on objectives. But the game changer is the blanket application of the assault keyword for all ranged weapons on all vehicle and mounted models. And just to clarify for anyone listening, the assault keyword means a unit can advance, gaining that D6 in of extra movement, and still fire its ranged weapons. This is completely transformative for Necron heavy support.
It is, because Necron firepower units have historically had this fundamental dilemma, haven't they?
They have movement or shooting.
Take the Doomsday Arc. It has a powerful high-damage cannon, but that cannon has different profiles. It achieves its best profile only when it remains stationary, so it forces the Arc to choose between movement and maximizing its primary firepower. It often just ended up stuck in the backfield.
A very expensive turret.
Exactly. Now, with Assault, the Arc is a mobile gunship. It can advance 5 or 6 in, gain its D6 advance, and still fire its main cannon and its flare areas.
This just solves the Ark's notorious mobility issues. It can reposition rapidly to target threats or shift to a scoring zone without sacrificing its lethality.
Removes that fundamental dilemma. They can participate fully in both scoring and shooting phases.
And this benefits the centerpiece model, the Silent King, Zarek. As he is explicitly a vehicle, he gets the assault keyword, making him and his menors terrifyingly consistent and mobile threats. They can advance to claim line of sight or get into scoring range while maintaining full output.
The sources show lists like Jonathan Arkin's 5-1 finish. It's the definition of a static army. The Lion L. Johnson's aura provides fight first and another layer of Muggus 1 to wound, which stacks with the detachment rules.
It creates this unbelievably resilient Death Star bubble that is mathematically agonizing for the opponent to engage. The whole game plan is simple. Sit on objectives, refuse to die, and just let the opponent attrition themselves out against your walls.
Now we take that concept of the Space Marine and flip it completely on its head. If the Dark Angels are the shield relying on mathematical certainty, the Blood Angels' rage-cursed onslaught is the ultimate expression of offensive risk. It's a total embrace of chaos and aggression.
This is the definitive example of battle shock manipulation as a core competitive resource. The detachment codifies the faction's Red Thirst identity into a tiered melee buff system via a rule called Maddened Ferocity.
And the passive buffs are already good, right?
They're very good. You get to re-roll wound rolls of 1 in melee, and you get +1 attack on the charge. That's a solid baseline.
But the Black Rage tier is the strategic hook. If the unit is battle-shocked, the bonus increases dramatically to +2 attacks.
And the stratagems just flips on its head. Battle shock, the liability, becomes the desired state, and the designers gave Blood Angels the tools to deliberately self-inflict this condition, understanding that losing OC is a necessary trade-off for maximum lethality.
So how do they actively choose to take on this negative state?
through stratagems like Red Wrath.
Red Wrath is a classic devil's bargain. It grants a critical offensive spike, +1 strength and +1 AP. However, the player can choose to become battle-shocked to receive both buffs. You take the test, and if you fail, you get the buffs. If you pass, you can choose to fail anyway. You accept OC0 just to activate the power.
And Insensate Rampage is crucial for delivery. It lets the unit advance and charge. And if you accept being battle-shocked, you avoid the charge rule penalty. It guarantees they arrive with the optimal activated buff profile.
The strategic trade-off is brutal, which is why we're calling it a Scorched Earth approach. The Blood Angels player accepts OC0. They accept the inability to use defensive strategies on that unit, but the overwhelming violence, the +2 attacks, +1 strength, and +1 AP, is designed to completely vaporize the enemy unit currently standing on the objective. It removes the control problem by removing the opponent.
This strategy relies entirely on tabling the opponent through superior melee output, rather than trying to sustain points control. And we saw Matt Charles's 5-0 list exemplify this aggression. He was using jump-packed Death Company with Power Fists and Inferno Pistols.
Let's just highlight the offensive profile of that unit when it's battle-shocked under Red Wrath. A 10-model squad of Death Company can output 40 to 50 Power Fist attacks.
50 Power Fist attacks.
50?
And those attacks are hitting its strength 9 or 10 with AP3 and damage 2. That profile in that volume can one-shot almost any vehicle, monstrous creature, or knight in the game. It is a terrifying surgical alpha strike weapon.
And the cleanup stratagem is Deathless Duty. This ensures the trade works in their favor.
Yes, it either lets the unit fight on death, or, critically, it applies a sticky on-death mechanic. It ensures the unit remains controlled even after the unit has been removed by enemy fire. They pay the cost of rage, but they hold the line.
It's the highest expression of conditional synergy, turning
It's list customization applied dynamically. And the competitive proof of this revival was Steve Trimble's Oops All Witches list at the Dragon's Cup. He went 5-0 with it. He ran 60 witches backed by Lilith Hesperax, all mounted in dedicated transports like Venoms.
And the strategy here relies purely on saturation. It's not about high AP or high strength, it's just sheer volume of attacks.
Absolutely. Buffed by the chosen combat drug and potentially stratagems for AP or lethal hits, those witches are outputting hundreds of attacks. Even against resilient armies like Custodes or anyone with a 2+ save, that volume eventually forces enough failed saves to overwhelm the defense. You force the opponent to roll 50, 60, 70 saves in a single phase. The failures will mount up regardless of their armor value.
And Lilith Hesper provides the critical high AP and attack count to finish off whatever the witches couldn't overwhelm with sheer numbers. It confirms that the fast volume of attack horde is a dominant and viable archetype again, punishing the durability that's so prevalent in the current meta.
Finally, we turn to Chaos, where we saw new complexity injected, especially into demons and the Emperor's Children.
Chaos Demons received 4 new detachments, but Nurgle's Virulent Victorium is the standout winner. Its rule, World Blight, grants sticky objectives that also radiate the faction's signature -1 toughness aura, Nurgle's Gift. This is a devastating attrition mechanic. The sticky objectives mean the Nurgle player establishes board control almost instantly. Then, any enemy unit that attempts to reclaim that objective is automatically debuffed with -1 toughness. This makes them significantly easier for the low-strength demon units to wound and kill. It's a beautifully thematic denial zone focused on relentless toxic attrition.
Then we have the Emperor's Children, which are split into 2 fascinating and high-risk playstyles. The Coterie of the Conceited is the ultimate gambler's detachment, introducing the packed points mechanic.
This mechanic rewards prediction and punishes failure. At the start of a round, the player makes a pledge that they will destroy a certain number of enemy units that turn. For example, I will destroy 3 units. If you fail, your warlord takes D3 mortal wounds.
The psychological pressure there is immense. You're forced to commit aggressively, knowing that failing your prediction actively harms your own core army asset.
It forces high-skill play and turn order planning, but if you succeed, you gain cumulative buffs that rapidly create a snowball effect. 1 point gets you roll 1s to hit. 3 points gets you reroll 1s to wound.
5 points grants lethal or sustained hits, and a massive 7 points gets you critical hits on a 5+ meet. By turn 3, a successful gambler could have an army operating with arguably the best offensive stats in the entire game.
It rewards aggression, prediction, and the ability to calculate kill potential with near-perfect accuracy. Now, while the coterie rewards risk, the Chord of the Phoenician focuses on extreme mobility and the inclusion of fulgrim.
This detachment solves a mechanical issue unique to large models. Their stratagem Sinuous Brows uses units, including those with large bases like fulgrim, to move horizontally through terrain features.
So fulgrim, the giant demon Primarch, can effectively just phase through walls in complex ruins that would normally slow him down or block his line of sight.
Exactly. This solves critical movement issues, allowing him to breach terrain and be precisely placed for maximum effect. Combined with the sensational performance rule, which gives +1 strength and +1 AP on the charge, the detachment turns fulgrim into a true raid boss that can ignore the board's geography and strike wherever the opponent is weakest.
Wow, we've seen overwhelming firepower, unbreakable defense, weaponized morale, and extreme mobility that ignores the rules of terrain. So what does this all mean? The Grotmas update didn't just change the rules, it fundamentally changed the philosophy of competitive 40k. Let's talk about the macro takeaways.
The primary shift, as we established, is from raw datasheet dominance to synergy activation. And this has 3 major implications that define the current meta and the future of the edition. The first is that Battle Shock is now a resource economy.
We saw clearly with the Blood Angels and their rage-cursed Onslaught, they willingly sacrificed defensive capability for hyper-aggression. But this philosophy extends beyond them, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Factions like the Night Lords, in their own indices, also weaponize Battle Shock and leadership testing to generate buffs and denial zones. And the meta consequence is profound. If you are running an anti-morale army, say Tyranids with their powerful synapse or Chaos Knights with their fear effects, you may actually be buffing your Blood Angels or Night Lord's opponent. You're forcing them into the exact state they want to be in.
So your counter-meta strategy is now complicated because your standard tools of psychological warfare can backfire spectacularly, activating your opponent's most lethal phase.
Our second key insight addresses the Dark Angel's success and the Guard's reliability, the superiority of math durability.
We contrast this with paper durability, just having high toughness like T4 or T5, or high S like a 2+ Pete. Why is that insufficient now?
Because the game is just saturated with ways to bypass those raw stats. We have abundant lethal hits, high-strength weaponry, and crucially rerolls that make high saves less reliable. If your save is 2+, but the enemy is rolling 15 attacks and re-rolling hits and wounds, those failures are going to stack up.
Right.
But math durability, which is exemplified by the -1 to wound modifier and the Dark Angel's dutiful tenacity, it breaks the attacker's efficiency at the source. If the enemy needs force to wound you instead of 3s, they've lost a third of their wounding potential regardless of whether their weapon is S8, S10, or S12.
It creates a protective layer that is resilient precisely against the meta's trend towards stacking high strength and high AP. For now, Magnus 1 to wound is arguably the single strongest defensive profile in 10th edition. It forces the attacker into low probability attacks before they even get to roll for a save.
And our final insight speaks to the death of the middle ground, the decline of the generalist list.
The Grotmas detachments reward extreme specialization, or what the community often calls skew lists.
Yes, the Grizzled Company demands a critical mass of officers and specialized weapons to maximize that order flow. The Spectacle of Spite demands you bring 60 or more witches to achieve the necessary volume of attacks. These lists have been tuned to perfection to exploit one singular powerful mechanic. A generalist list, say a balanced Gladius-style Space Marine force that is good at everything but excellent at nothing, it simply cannot efficiently answer the hyper-specialized questions these lists pose. You cannot bring the tools necessary to simultaneously counter infinite reliable S10 melt-a-shots and an unbreakable core of neg is 1 to wound terminators with the same list structure. You have to specialize to counter specialization.
So in conclusion, the Winter 2025 Grotmas update successfully injected chaos, complexity, and specialized power, redefining the competitive landscape. The top tables are now dominated by what we're calling benchmark armies, lists that ask specific, mathematical, hard-to-answer questions.
And the questions are unforgiving. Can you efficiently kill 30 Terminators with Pneumatis 1 to wound -1 damage and a 4+ invulnerable save? Or can your vehicle survive a turn of 30 Melta-shots hitting on 2s with rerolls? If your list cannot answer those benchmarks, you lose.
The competitive scene now fixates on the Las Vegas Open, the LVO, which is the next massive testing ground. Everyone's waiting to see how the counter-meta adapts to these powerful new forces. If the Grotmas armies are the problem, what's the strategic solution?
The tactical solution, based on our analysis, will lean heavily into mechanics that bypass the primary defensive strengths we've discussed. That means aggressive use of devastating wounds, which skips the defensive modifiers like -1 to wound entirely. It often bypasses the save and just pushes direct mortal wounds through.
And the second solution, as you mentioned earlier, is precision weaponry. If the Grizzled Company is a synergy chain entirely powered by its officers, the commissars, the tank commanders, the Lord Solar, then snipping those characters with precision attacks can dismantle the entire engine from the top down.
It turns those reliable units back into variance assets. It will be a fascinating period of adaptation that demands a higher level of strategic mastery from players willing to engage with these conditional rule sets. The complexity is the highest it has been since the edition launched.
That leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over this week. We discussed how Battle Shock became a resource for the Blood Angels. Consider how other armies outside of the ones we talked about might leverage a currently negative rule, perhaps a low leadership score or a mandatory movement penalty, to generate a hidden positive buff. Which failure state could become a desirable trigger? And second, looking at the sheer power of the 3 core new conditions, orders, battle shock, or the assault keyword on heavy weapons, which of those 3 do you think will be the easiest or the most necessary for the developers to rebalance next? Think about the ripple effects if one of those conditions were reduced in power by just 1 degree. That's your deep dive for the week. We'll see you next time.